Ballpark Nation presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros burning.
First pitch. And Alex finds it to the left center field at the base hit. Pitcher around third is coming home. Easier up with the baseball. The throw to the plate. Not in time. Astros win. Astros win.
One every time.
Alvarez hits a high drive center field. Veer leans back. This game is turned upside down.
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
Welcome to Go Astros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
Here come the Astros breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros.
And good morning, everyone. This is Go Astros coming to you. I am only about 180 miles from Daikin Park, home of your Houston Astros. Andy's much closer, and Brian's the furthest away. Daikin Park, I'm interested in your take on it because on the one hand, it's the thing that matters the least about what's going on with the baseball team, except for maybe if it's given Jim Crane a little bit more scratch. On the other hand, as you know, Andy, I've always kind of thought the name Minute Maid Park was sort of dumb, so I'm open to something new. I'm interested in what you guys think. Andy, we'll start with you.
Well, up until yesterday, I was 90% sure Daikin was one of the 36-cent Shogun Warriors that I used to have as a kid. It was really cool. It was before we got all pussified with our toys. An entire fist launched off, and sometimes it carried a sword. I mean, you'd really take an eye out with that sort of thing if you had like a cousin you didn't care for. Turns out that was not that. They're an air conditioning manufacturer. And ultimately, it matters not even a little bit, other than people being sentimental about a park that it was on its third name and now on its fourth.
Right.
And ironically, most of the fans who are most upset don't remember that it was Enron Field or Astros Field for a year before it was Minute Maid. So as long as the money is flowing in, this is the reality of sports in 2024. As long as somebody is paying for those rights, I don't really care. I would have loved if it would have been HEB Park. That was a rumored thing that could have happened. I don't think HEB to me would have made a lot of sense from a regional perspective. It would make no sense nationally because they have no plans to expand outside Texas. So that's
good.
But literally it could be anything. It could be Sony Park. It could be my Tiger Park. I don't care. Whoever has the money besides Elon Musk can sponsor my stadium anytime.
Besides Elon Musk.
I will not go to Musk Park. Nor should you.
Nor should anybody. Brian, what did you think about it all?
Yeah, it's Andy's right here that it's not that big a deal. We lose, which corporate sponsor names your stadium, right? There are a handful where you go like, okay, that sort of like works. You have Citi Field here in New York, which, is CIT because it's named after the bank, but it's the least sort of objectionable of these names. And it's not like there's a real name to this park. It's not like if they renamed Camden Yards to some sort of thing that would sort of get rejected. So it's not like, we're going to go back to calling it Crawford Box Park the way we always have. I will note this here. The Daikin Park will have air conditioning, unlike the Carrier Dome, which, besmirched the name of one of the greatest heroes in the history of Texas, Willis Carrier, who invented air conditioning by, taking naming rights to a building that did not have air conditioning. Fun fact, they no longer have naming rights on the Syracuse Dome, so it's someone else that I don't,
It's funny because I actually was on the phone with my season ticket holder rep about 2 weeks ago, talking to her about the air conditioning, and that's been the top to bottom, the biggest complaint from all the season ticket holders this year. And so my hope is that we will actually get an air conditioning thing. Now, The two biggest, I think, impacts of this have been people speculating what's going to go in the back of the train. I'm hoping it's a bunch of old window units, just sort of hanging out there.
I
Brian,
got a couple. I'm in a window unit house because I don't live in civilization here near New York. So if they need some to put there, I can certainly volunteer some if Crane wants to send, or maybe Drayton McLean sends one of those McLean trucks to my house. I can put it on that for me.
What do you want to see back there? Anything, or do you even care?
Well, I was hoping for several small Southeast Asian children to represent the labor who actually puts together the air conditioning units across most of their manufacturing plants.
I like to point out that the views of Go Astros do not necessarily represent those of Andy Tom Chestnut.
But it'll probably be ice cubes.
Yeah, I just hope. You know what I hope? I hope they just paint the damn train when they get up there, and now they can paint it to match the actual colors of the team.
The problem is with that, to paint the train, you'd have to get Bobby Dynamite out of there for an extended period of time, and I think he lives there.
He might, yeah. He doesn't care what happens to the back of the train as long as the arrow.
Where are you going to relocate him for the 2 weeks it's going to take to paint that train, Jim?
I don't know.
Roy Hoffheinz's suite still available at the Astrodome?
Not even a little bit. And I guess ultimately there are 8 teams currently that don't have sponsorship deals. This is a reality of baseball and major in sports, both college and pro, throughout every league. 3 of those teams don't need it. Dodger Stadium, Yankee Stadium, Fenway Stadium don't need a sponsor. I don't think there's a future where they don't eventually have one, but it's not a big pressing need. You could argue that Wrigley is a corporate name, even though it's a family name. But the other ones, I just don't know that there's, industry enough to take care of the Nationals Park. And they had a deal that fell through in 2016 or something like that. So this is the norm, and it is normal for these parks to eventually change names because sponsorship deals run out, or like Minute Maid, who got folded back into Coca-Cola corporate a couple of years ago. They cease to be an entity that can generate the kind of revenue independently to have naming rights. So I read somebody that somewhere that Minute Maid didn't want to sponsor the Astros anymore because of the cheating scandal from 7 years ago. That was the justification for them backing out of a deal that was supposed to run another 10 years. This person actually believed this. I don't think he was trolling.
Hey, can I go baseball history here?
Sure.
Yeah, they named it Fenway Park as part of a real estate thing to get more people to move to that part of the city, which was relatively new when it opened in 1914. So as uncorporate as it is today, it's kind of like Wrigley in that it was corporate-ish at the time. But you had to name it after stuff like that because when Augustus Busch bought the Cardinals, his plan was to rename it Budweiser Stadium, and the league told him he couldn't do that, so he named it after himself. And then created a beer named after himself. If you enjoy Busch Light, that's where it comes from.
And as I learned this summer on my tour of Wrigley, it actually did start out as a traditional naming rights situation because Wrigley was not the majority owner of the team. So
Wrigley Gum, the Wrigley Gum family.
Yeah. All right. Well, that takes care of that subject. Now we're going to get
old is new again.
What's that?
Everything old is new again.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to a long Jim Crane quote that Brian shared with us the other day. Basically referencing Alex Bregman. I'm going to get to the part where, he talks about wanting to try and field the best team we can without going crazy. Some of the payrolls are pretty high for the bigger teams, but I think we were the 5th highest. That's the first time we've ever done that. We have the wherewithal to do it if we need to do it. I talked about negotiations with Bregman and Scott Boras. Having been visiting frequently, Crane said earlier this month, Brown characterized their conversations as productive. Crane said he talked to Boras once early, but leaving the negotiations to Brown. And we all know Scott is going to do what he can to get the most money for him if it's a place he wants to go. But at some point, we have to look at making a decision. We're looking at it as a backup. We are looking now as a backup, and we're exploring. There's a lot to unpack. One of which I want to start with the thing I want to unpack first, Brian, is Brown's making the decisions or the negotiation. And I'm assuming, of course, Crane's still going to sign off on whatever money it is because it's not Brown's money, it's Crane's. But what are your take on that?
Yeah, that was at the top of my list of things I noted off that because, Jim Crane has signed some contracts himself, and, we're going to pay those players not to play for us this year. Obviously owners have a big, as you said, Jim, owners have a big, it's their budget, it's their money. They get to approve sort of the final budget. But look, who knows more about evaluating baseball players? It's Dana Brown and the people in the front office, and they should be as predominant as possible on making these decisions. And that hasn't necessarily been the case because obviously you had the offseason where Crane ran baseball operations. But, one thing I've been tracking is it's been unclear how much power Dana Brown has compared to broadly Jim Crane himself, right? And then Jim Crane's other advisors who are kind of near, but not necessarily in the front office. And so I take that as an encouraging sign that Dana Brown has sort of built up some credibility within the organization. We shall see. One thing to note here on this is one of Scott Boris's negotiating tactics is to go over the head of general managers and talk to the owners directly. So, I assume if he gets an offer and wants to beat it, he will do that because, well, he's done it many times before. Many owners have blocked Scott Boras on their phone so they don't the urging of the general managers. So,
yeah, what it is too. I think it shows the evolution of. We can't underestimate, or at least I don't underestimate how I think Jim Crane kind of felt betrayed a little bit by Lunau with the whole scandal. And I think it's maybe taken him some time to find somebody he feels like he can rely on. And hopefully Brown has earned that trust, like you said. Andy, what do you see from just that part of the statement of Brown's in charge of all of this?
It's a nice thing to say to the media. I mean, ultimately, Jim Crane approves that contract or doesn't because it is going to be something that tips us over the scale on at least one level of luxury tax, if not two, depending on what the deal is, if this signing happens. And if it doesn't happen, there's going to be a whole nother set of finances that gets put in front of Jim Crane in regards to signing a first baseman, potentially signing a replacement at third base, maybe signing a left fielder. There's noise that they would like to sign Kikuchi back again as a member of the rotation. So there's a bunch of moving parts that are all kind of held up by the Bregman signing, which is another thing that I think Crane alluded to, which may be something you're going to get to in a minute, that they do at some point have to make a decision to either move forward with Alex Bregman or move forward without Alex Bregman. And because they can't find themselves in a position in mid-January to try to be plugging holes.
Right. Yeah. It's musical chairs, right? And they can't be caught. They can't be the ones caught without a seat.
Yeah. He talked about a backup plan, right? And well, I don't know if the owner needs to be talking about that, but front offices need to be, and this is part of why you have large front office staffs, right? Is that some part of that is dedicated to what can we offer Bregman, what's the market there, but another is, and probably more resources are into, what's the market for third baseman, both for trades and for free agents, both in terms of sort of evaluation of the players, but also what it would cost. And, part of that is a minor league development. Is Zach DeZenzo or Shea Whitcomb or Bryce Matthews, can they handle third base if necessary, which I'm skeptical of, but they have better knowledge on that than I do.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it too, Andy, is by making that statement, it's also part of the negotiating process through the press, right?
Well, yeah, both sides are going to be doing that. Yesterday, I think Tim Britton, who covers the Mets for The Athletic, was carrying some water for Alex Bregman and Scott Boras by basically saying that he thought that Bregman and Boras were shooting for a Manny Machado type deal, 11 years, $350 million.
That was Ken Rosenthal. So let's get the right Gunga Din here.
Well, it was Rosenthal's column, but he was quoting Tim Britton. But they both do the same job for Boras.
Yeah.
The media loves carrying water for Scott Boras, and this is part of this game.
Yeah.
The only reason Crane had a statement at all is because he was asked by the media. He's negotiating through the media, just like Dana Brown is going to negotiate through the media to some extent, the same way Scott Boras is. The whole idea that Bregman wants a Manny Machado type deal, that he's willing to play second base, that there's a giant market for him, and the Astros know that, are all negotiating tactics. And none of these sports writers.
I would like to note that if anyone wants to offer me an 11-year, $330 million contract, I will consider it. But I think I have as much chance of getting that as does Alex Bregman. But
I think you could hold out for more, Brian. Frankly, and so does Scott Boras. He
has the shine on Scott Boras come off a little bit, because there have been several clients that he talked about having these big markets for, and then they ended up signing large one-year deals only to enter free agency again because they weren't getting the market wasn't doing what Boras thought the market was doing.
So from my perspective, that's on the players more than Boras. Boras does what Boras is told to do. And our great example here in Houston is Jose Altuve is still playing for the Houston Astros and has signed an extension with the Houston Astros because that's where he wanted to play. There are players, certainly and I'm going to just assume Jordan Montgomery, who didn't care about missing spring training, who did not care ultimately what team he signed for, as long as he was going to get the money that he was looking for. It didn't work out because they played a waiting game, and they ended up with a contract that now even the D-backs owner is publicly bad-mouthing. But it's the nature of the game. If you want to sign with a team, you're going to figure out a way to sign with that team. Scott Boras will make that happen. If you give Scott Boras free reign, that's not on Scott Boras. That's on you as a player. So I don't know that it's Scott Boras' inability all of a sudden to negotiate contracts for certain players as much as it is certain players giving up too much control of the process.
Yeah. And broadly, one reason players signed with Scott Boras is that he is, on the whole, good at getting them their market rate contracts. But he also engages in strategies that are more risk acceptant, that take on more risk in order to do that. And he's given an example of something that didn't work. Matt Chapman is a similar story, but with an opposite conclusion. Matt Chapman signed the one-year pillow deal. You put your pillow down somewhere for a year and then pick it up the next year. But the Giants liked it and signed him to a contract, a 6-year extension off that deal. So again, it's a risky strategy. Part of why Scott Boras is a big deal is because he is the agent for Juan Soto and Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve and Lance McCullers and a bunch of the free agents on the market this year. He is the most important agent in the game. He is the most famous agent in the game by far, and the only one who gives press conferences at the owners' meetings and the general managers' meetings because of the players and their faith in him.
I'm still pretty bullish on Bregman signing with the Astros, and I've seen many more predictions come out where it seems like most of the pundits feel that's going to happen too. Why do you feel like they think Bregman's more of a lock than – because nobody thought, in my opinion, nobody thought Correa or Springer was coming back. So why do you think – we'll start with Andy on this one. Why do you feel like the national media seems more bullish on Bregman staying in Astro than maybe the other three?
I think part of it is there's not necessarily an apparent market for Bregman. There's plenty of teams that could use an Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman is a far above average player, but he is over the hump at 30. He is a player whose defensive skills are probably going to diminish over time, over the length of the contract that he's looking for. And the teams,
which is why they mentioned the second base thing, right? To say he can play it as he gets older. Yeah.
The teams outside of the Yankees that normally need a third baseman that would also spend that kind of money aren't necessarily looking for the third baseman. You're seeing teams get creative. The Phillies typically, at least recently, have large payrolls, but they have a younger, maybe as good a version as at third base right now. And that's a place that they have. You've seen Bregman linked a little bit, but that would necessitate trading Alex Baum to another team. And I've seen the Astros eventually sign him, or trade for him, which is a weird turn of events if that were to happen. I just don't think there's enough big players with big payrolls who are in the third base market to make Bregman a Manny Machado type player. Much less, a little bit less than that. I also think there is some consideration for the fact that Bregman seems to be happy here. I think likes free agency. I think he'll like the attention that he gets during free agency, but I still believe that at the end of the day, if there's a way to get Crane over past the 5-year hump, that Bregman will sign here. Because I don't think the dollars per year matter. I think it's just the length of contract for Crane.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm hoping, Brian, I want you to answer the pundit question, but also follow it up with what the Astros need now is different than 5 years ago. And maybe the 6-year contract or 7-year contract makes more sense when you look at the farm system is still pretty weak. It's going to take time to build that up. And you want to have some kind of stability going forward if, in fact, you think the window is never going to close.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the sort of analysis, right, is that if you don't have Alex Bregman at third base, we don't know, right? Unlike, hey, are they going to re-sign George Springer? Well, they've got Cal Tucker coming up. He can essentially replace him and be better, which is the case. Can they, they've got Jeremy Pena, who they really like, who, they were right to like. It's not as good as Carlos Correa, but he's been, a solid, absolutely solid shortstop for 3 seasons. They're going to replace Bregman with, we don't know.
And
Jose Altuve, unlike the other guys, has mentioned this. And broadly, this is the place, and this is where you sort of talk at it, Jim, where they are on the success cycle, right? If they want to continue to be successful, they are unlikely to have a whole bunch of players in the minor league come up and take over. Maybe they will, right? We were sitting here when Garrett, talking about Garrett Cole 5 years ago. We weren't saying, hey, they've got this guy who came up in long relief this year named Framber Valdez, and he's going to be essentially the World Series MVP one year. You wouldn't have said that then. So maybe, right? Their track record's pretty good, but the material they have to work with right now doesn't seem all that promising. So one potential response to that is this is when you ramp up spending. And again, the key to this is, as Andy said, Jim Crane's never signed a contract that covers more than 5 free agent seasons.
Yeah.
Including Jose Altuve, who, by the way, needs 6 seasons to get to 3,000 hits. But he's only signed for 5 more years. So I'll have to do this again with him to get him to the 3,000 hit, assuming he's healthy. He's really sort of maintained that, but he's willing to spend a lot of money within those 5 years. See the Josh Hader contract. So again, that's a Jim Crane decision more than but part of a skill of a general manager is talking your owner into spending money. We'll see how good Dana Brown is that on that.
I know, Andy, you wanted to chime in, and I definitely want to hear what you were going to say, but also, too, that feels like the leftover of the Lunau age of saying this is what we don't do long contracts. And I think just the idea is we all saw it coming with all the trades for Verlander and Greinke that eventually you were going to have to rebuild the farm system. And I think that's why Dana Brown came in. But it does seem like the way we get things done now has to be a little different for the next couple of seasons.
Well, I think the other part of that is the Astros. Brian mentioned Framber Valdez. The Astros are very good at developing pitchers. We've talked about this on the show a number of times, that they have whatever you want to call the special sauce, whether it's analytics, skills, coaching, whatever those things are in combination, we are able to turn out and redeem major league pitching. We have not been as successful in generating position players. And of note, and I know people will argue, well, Chaz had a good year. And Kyle Tucker's the last guy we really produced from the farm system that is somebody that you'd go, yeah, that's an all-star caliber player.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Pena had a good year. He is a cost-effective replacement for Carlos Correa. And I don't think he's as bad as our fan base thinks he is right now. Right. But he's a shortstop who can hit sometimes, which is what most teams in the league have. Yeah. There just isn't a guy who's ready to play third base in the Astros system. If you sign Bregman, that also allows you to not spend money on first base. So that opens up a spot for Zach DeZenzo, which I think is the plan, but there's probably a couple plans there. And then maybe you have a few dollars, depending on how that contract is structured, to deal with left field or deal with a left-handed hitting outfielder. I think that's why we were talking last week about floating out the idea of trading one of our high-dollar relievers. I still don't think that, depending on how they see the window, one of our current starting pitchers is untouchable. And maybe that's Framber Valdez, which we've talked about. Maybe that's somebody else. But I think outside of Hunter Brown, I don't know that there's anybody that's really untouchable in the rotation. I don't really think there should be. I don't know how they project Arrighetti to continue to progress. Maybe they think he's as good as Hunter Brown. So there's a lot of things at play, but we're still getting back to this point that we can't do anything until the Bregman question is settled. And that's what, we're all digging through Twitter or Blue Sky or wherever you happen to be these days, waiting for any kind of nugget of news to figure out, all right, what's happening next. All you're seeing right now is just heaps of speculation. And frankly, most of the press is focused on Juan Soto, and rightfully they should be. That's going to be the biggest splash.
And Juan Soto is going to sign first because because Boris is not going to, unless he gets wowed by an offer. Hey, somebody who didn't get Juan Soto, maybe they want Alex Bregman, particularly if the Yankees don't sign Juan Soto.
Right, and he's going to be the biggest one to set the market anyway, right? Like he is going to. I guess before we get out of here, then speculation. Where do you guys see Juan Soto signing? For some reason, I don't see him coming back to the Yankees. I've seen the Blue Jays, which would kind of be on brand for them. They have been throwing a lot of money at free agency. Just like I almost feel bad for like Angel fan and Blue Jay fan because those owners are trying to spend. Like it's not like they're cheap; they just haven't worked out. But so I kind of feel like I could see Toronto and I can see the Mets. I just don't feel like I see the Yankees. Brian, what about you?
I disagree. I think the Yankees kind of have to sign him.
Okay.
Because they're such a top-heavy team, that if they lose essentially 7-8 wins they got from Soto, they're back to being, in the pack for a wild card. And if things go poorly, they'll be out of the playoffs like they were in 2023. So they kind of have to sign him. And, hey, they're the Yankees. They're supposed to sign him. They have the money for it.
Andy?
My leader in the clubhouse is probably the Mets because Cohen will spend the money, and he's potentially going to lose Pete Alonso. And they would really love, knowing my Met fan friends, they would really love to stick it to the Yankees by taking a star player. So that's a big deal in that market and in Major League Baseball. My dark horse, who has not been mentioned at all, is the Giants because every year Scott Boras has a meeting with them about his top players. And every year they get really close to the end of that process, and then something happens. They probably more than any of the brand franchises in Major League Baseball need a face. And so it makes a lot of sense for Soto to be manning that outfield for the next 10 to 11 years. Will that happen? I don't know. But if I've got to pick somebody out of the ether that's not the Astros, because there's a mystery team that Scott Boris's media friends are floating.
Isn't there always?
Let it be the
I'll offer a different dark horse, both for Soto and Bregman, which is the Nationals, who are a team on the rise, but aren't spending a lot of money because they've got such young players and have the salary spot for someone who gets on base a lot.
I'll give you another dark horse. I think the Astros sign him. I really don't think the Astros sign him, but wouldn't that be fun? Andy, I kind of
sign him to go in the train.
That's right.
It'll be him and Altuve doing the whole Bugs Bunny baseball situation.
Yeah, and that's what it'll be. Is all his big requirement is all the baseballs must be painted with his face on it in the train. And you know what? Why not? I actually like the idea of the Giants taking him only because you're right. They swung big at Aaron Judge and they swung big at trying to get Correa and
Shohei Ohtani.
And Ohtani, right? And things have just happened, including I think Aaron Judge was using that as a marketing tool. I don't think he was ever leaving the Yankees, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, part of what happened is he used the offer from the Giants to say to the Yankees, "This is what it costs. I'm going to do it or not."
I don't get out of bed for less than this. Yeah. With my salary at St. Michael's, I don't get out of bed for less than $150 a day. For Andy, for Brian, I am Jim Christopher. We will be back next week, a little Thanksgiving episode as we get ready for some more Go Astros. See y'all next week.